So we come to our final sermon in our series of God's Big Story, the end, or is it, the new creation? And our text is from Revelation chapter 22. Then the angel showed me water of life river, crystal bright. It flowed from the throne of God and the Lamb right down the middle of the street. The tree of life was planted on each side of the river, producing 12 kinds of fruit, a ripe fruit each month. The leaves of the tree offer healing the nations. Never again will anything be cursed. The throne of God and of the Lamb is at the centre. His servants will offer God service, worshipping. They'll look on his face, their foreheads mirroring God. Never again will there be any night. No one will need lamplight or sunlight. The shining of God the Master is all the light anyone needs, and they will rule with him age after age after age. At last the fall is overcome. The breach between humanity and God is healed through the sacrifice of the Lamb, Jesus. Where there was division and pain, now there is healing, wholeness, fullness and rest. Or at least that will be the case in heaven as far as Christians are concerned. The big story ends with a confident picture of what will be the case. While the world continues as a place of light and darkness, beauty and ugliness, joy and suffering, the process to renew the world has begun through Jesus' death and resurrection and will be completed in a new creation. A London businessman told the story of a warehouse property he was selling. The building had been empty for months and needed repairs. Vandals had damaged the doors, smashed the windows and strewn rubbish around the interior. As he showed a prospective buyer the property, he took pains to say that he would replace the broken windows, bring in a crew to correct any structural damage and clean out the rubbish. Forget about the repairs, the buyer said. When I buy this place, I'm going to build something completely different. I don't want the building. I want the site. Compared with the renovation God has in mind for us, our efforts to improve our own lives are as trivial as sweeping a warehouse destined for demolition. When we become God's, the old life is over. He makes all things new. We become a new creation. All he wants is the site and the permission to build. The book of Revelation is a controversial and difficult text, but it sets out the ultimate hope of heaven that is already present but not fully realised. Christians are offered comfort that despite appearances to the contrary, God will overcome and dispel all evil. They're also reminded that living as citizens of heaven is going to require commitment and resolve, often in the face of suffering and persecution. Many Christians believe that even though Jesus has bought their place in heaven through his sacrifice, they must continue to fight evil and injustice, whatever the personal cost. Following the Lamb who was slain, it's not a matter of putting up with some minor inconvenience on a Sunday morning. Prominent in the description of heaven in Revelation 7 are those who have come through great trials. The book also offers strong warnings against people compromising their walk with God in a world of temptation. Continuing sin is a serious matter. For some Christians, Revelation points to a renewal of his world. The presence of the city in Revelation chapters 21 and 2 suggests there will be no simple return to Eden, but a making good of all human achievements and a fulfilment of all the promises of creation. Interpreting the book of Revelation is a complex matter, and there's much disagreement among Christians over it. While some see this vision as a literal picture of heaven, many Christians see it as symbolic or metaphorical, even though they think it's symbolic of a reality. The idea of heaven as a city suggests that it will be a completion of all the good that humanity has achieved, not simply a return to the garden paradise. The idea that heaven comes downwards to earth also suggests to some that heaven will be a renewal of this earth, this universe, not some spiritual realm divorced from our material reality. Human beings will be resurrected to live in this new creation. Jerusalem wasn't a particularly grand or beautiful city. It wasn't exactly a beacon of purity and goodness to the world either. But here it is, transformed, renewed, as a bride adorned for her husband. For many Christians, this suggests that good can be brought out of dark and unpromising places. After the fall, human beings were barred from access to the tree of life. According to this vision in the new creation, it will be freely available. There are many key images to be found in Revelation 21 and 2. The city, the New Jerusalem. The city represents a Christian church set up by God to draw people to Jesus. The sea vanished. The sea often symbolises chaos, and in some biblical visions, evil powers of different sorts emerge from the sea. There will be none of that in heaven. The city, a perfect cube. The Ark of the Covenant was a cube and represented the presence of God with the Israelites when they were in the desert. The city is a much bigger cube, shows that God is present in a much greater way in heaven. 12 gates named with 12 tribes of Israel. The 12 tribes of Israel were not model followers of God, but God still includes them as part of this heavenly city. The 12 foundation stones were the names of the 12 apostles. Jesus' disciples were an unpromising bunch. At least 6 of them are still pretty obscure, but God used them in their service and the foundation of his heavenly city. The precious stones of jasper, sapphire, emerald. These stones emphasise the abundant beauty and the clarity of light in heaven. It's bright with the different coloured stones reflecting the full spectrum of colours. I did not see a temple in the city. Israel represented God's presence to the other nations. The Ark of the Covenant represented God's presence to Israel. The temple was a place where the Ark was kept, hidden in the Holy of Holies. Since God is present in heaven, there is no need for a temple or an ark. The gates will stand open all day. No evil will threaten, so there's no need to close the gates. They allow open access for all. And the river of the water of life. As Eden was watered by the rivers, so heaven provides the necessities for human life. The source of all life is God. The tree of life. Adam and Eve were expelled from Eden and unable to reach the tree of life. Here it is available for all. In Eden, taking it from the tree brought a curse. Here, the tree brings healing. God's kingdom is the world as God intended it to be. Christians look forward to the day when God's kingdom fully comes and earth and heaven are transformed. Until that time, they strive to build the kingdom in their communities, empowered by the Holy Spirit and reflecting Jesus' example in the world.